Welcome to week 4 of Crit 101. We're going to get started straight away, and I'm going to just take a brief moment to reflect on the fact that we're at halfway through the course. And then I'm going to talk about reading and analysis, which is this week's focus. And finally, as usual, I'm going to go through everything that you need to do this week, your assignment, blog posts, and things like that. The course, as you might remember, is built on 3 tenets: openness, social media, and the idea of student voice and choice. And I think those things have been reflected very much over the first 3 weeks of the course. Certainly the fact that the blog is out there and all of your work is syndicated, so this has been a very open process and people can see what you're doing and what's happening within the course. Social media is at the heart of it, though I think in version 2 of the course that hasn't been quite as much the case as it was the first time round, which is interesting because it's a key part of what I want to kind of develop within the process. But I think there's still more work to be done there, and it's something that I need to look at more closely. And certainly there's been a case of student voice and choice. Lots of you are commenting on blogs. That seems to be a space where some of you feel more comfortable airing your views and ideas and talking to one another, which is great. So you've made a kind of a choice there as to where you want to go and put your information. And certainly the time of the Twitter chat has moved earlier. That seems to be more a popular choice, to be a little bit earlier than 7 o'clock. So that'll continue in the next couple of weeks. So the tenets are certainly present within the course, and I hope that that continues. One of the key things, and I'm going to keep talking about it, I feel, as we go along, is this idea of networking, connecting, and that it's really about, ultimately, I suppose, sharing of ideas, thoughts, processes, even if it's not necessarily collaborating directly, but at least that idea of supporting one another by sharing what's happening and what's going on within the course. So I just want to encourage you again just to kind of think about that and try and make this idea of connecting and collaborating a part of what you're doing within the course. I don't mind where you do it, choose your platform. Twitter, blogs, as I said, lots of you are getting involved in the commenting, sharing and supporting each other in terms of like this process. Use Google Docs. You're going to be using Google Docs again this week with a partner. I know that some of you found week 2 challenging, but you did enjoy the experience of using Google Docs, and you plan to like improve the way you use it. So this will be your opportunity to do that during week 4, or use another space. I don't want to dictate everything within the course. If there's a tool that you know of or a space that you'd rather meet with your partner or others and collaborate and share ideas, then please go there. But do let me know. Do tweet out what you're doing and use the hashtag so I can see kind of what's happening within the course. But part of this is about you taking some ownership of how you kind of work with one another and connect. So let's get straight on and talk about reading and analysis. We're going to be talking very much about processes and the idea of critique this week, and that's what I really want to delve into to help you get off to a good start with this week's assignment. First of all, I think it's important to reflect on reading itself. Reading is sometimes taken for granted, and as Jim Groom is saying, we shouldn't do that. We need to look at reading critically and recognize it as something that is a skill that needs to be developed. And I often find in students at times that there are some shortcomings, some skills that I kind of assume would be there that certainly were developed in me, but I don't think it's the case for all students that these skills are naturally developed. They're skills like having curiosity and wanting to ask questions about what you're reading. That's really, really important. And sometimes I find that students will just read purely for pleasure, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I think that in this sort of reading, academic reading, it's supposed to be an active process. You've got to be an active participant. And while you might get away with skipping 1 or 2 words when you're just reading for fun, you need to actively look at what you're reading. And if you don't understand things, you need to go and investigate and explore what those things might be. You also need to read for context. Context is massively important. Oftentimes in the text that we're reading, there might be references to other texts or to other media or to history and things like that, and we need to make sure that we understand those references and allusions if we're going to have a really full understanding of the text. So reading's not to be taken lightly. It is an actual skill that needs to be kind of improved upon. One of the issues with that then is that you really can't be a lazy reader, and there isn't really an excuse in my mind. If you're reading something and you come across a word you don't know, or you encounter an idea or a concept and you're not sure about it, well, you know, the generation that I tend to be talking to and teaching have the internet at your disposal. And while we might argue about the shortcomings sometimes of things like Wikipedia and the reliability of it, ultimately Wikipedia, Google, these are great spaces to go and find out information, and if you develop your skills in using those tools, you can get to some reliable and useful stuff. But ultimately, looking up a word or finding out things, you can go and do it. Certainly, if we just take the word analysis itself, I'm going to be using it a lot in today's presentation. But simply using the word define and then adding analysis afterwards in a Google search tells me what it is, and it tells me that it's an examination of the elements or structure of something. It's a basis for discussion and interpretation, and that's certainly what I'm going to be wanting you to engage in this week. But that was easy. It took me seconds just to find out what that word means. So, don't be a lazy reader. Use the tools that are there at your disposal. You don't want to go to the internet, well, go grab a dictionary or thesaurus. I'm sure that you'll find you've got one lying around the house somewhere. And then context. Context is this idea that we can place a text or an article that we're reading in a sort of wider framework. It could be a social context, for example. We could look at the text in relation to what's happening in society around us. It could be historical context. Sometimes, certainly those of you who might be studying literature will be looking at texts that were written, possibly hundreds of years ago. So it's important to then perhaps go and find out more about what life was like at the time, what key events were happening. You can place the text then in that context and develop your understanding. We can also place texts within sort of like a wider range of contexts, in that we might look within a text and there might be references to other literature. So we need to go and find out what that literature is and make sure that we're aware of it and what it's about. That changes our understanding of a text. It might be that, certainly modern articles, things that we might read on the internet might allude to a whole diverse range of texts. And I use texts in the loosest term there. It could be to films, comic books, all sorts of different sorts of media might be referred to in an article that you might be looking at. And again, we can go and use tools like the internet to go and find out more information about what those things are, so we have a fuller, clearer understanding of what we're reading, and that's really, really important. Analytically, critique, or to be critical, is not to criticize. So we use the word critique, but it's not a negative process. It's a process of being kind of questioning and honest in what you're doing. So it's about looking at a text and taking the information, and whether or not you agree with it, asking questions of it. So you might agree, but you still need to show that your critical voice. You still need to show that you're prepared to hold things up that sound right, and actually pull them apart and analyze them to show that deeper understanding and appreciation of them. And similarly, things that you might not agree with, ideas that you do disagree with, we should critique and analyze and interpret those. So it's not necessarily a negative process, but it's about being critical, it's about being analytical. So, when reading a text, what we need to do is work through some stages, really. And the first stage is to get a sense of the whole text, to read it through, and just make sure that we understand it, to develop that initial basic understanding of the thesis of the text. What is the argument within the text? What is the author's point of view? What are they trying to say? And develop that kind of understanding. It's what we might call like a pre-reading process. And there are things we can do at that stage to help make sure we get to grips with it. We want to remain objective, certainly, in the process, and we might write a summary, and I just identify the key points. Very clear and basic skill, something that I work on with my students all the time. But can you just take away what the main ideas are from the text? Can you get a text? Can you get a clear understanding? But what is also important, and in this idea of writing a critique, is that you have to develop a personal opinion about the text. And so you might also write down your thoughts on a separate piece of paper or on a separate document. What is your point of view? Where do you stand with this article? What's your personal opinion on it? Both things are valid, and I would argue that they're both of equal importance. So it is important to kind of look at what's there in the text and have a clear understanding of what it is, but it's also important for you to develop reasonably quickly how you feel about the text, where your point of view sits. Once you've kind of got that and you've got a sort of like a starting point, then you need to start to analyze. And analysis really is about breaking something down into its like smallest parts. And by doing that, we can really deconstruct the meaning behind the text. This might involve like pulling out key quotations, looking at those quotations and analyzing and interpreting what is meant by them, looking at the sort of deeper meaning and what can be inferred from the text. So talk about the idea of inference a lot. Can you read between the lines? What conclusions can you draw out from the text that are not said as directly? Are there any biases within the text, any assumptions that the author is making that we might be able to like critique it and look at more closely? We also want to evaluate. So evaluation is sometimes its own sort of process, but to me it's part of the analytical process itself. And if we're going to really look at a text carefully, we need to not only look at what is written, but we need to look at any references. As I was alluding to earlier, if a text refers to other articles or literary text, media, we need to go and investigate those and look at how they might impact on the meaning of what's being said. We need to look at any sources. So just as we've been doing already with your own research, you need to go and investigate the sources that have been used and the data. Is it reliable? Is it valid? Where did it come from? So we've got to be asking these questions. So as you can start to see, this really is a questioning process. Analysis is about really kind of delving in deeply. Yeah? What evidence have they provided within the text to support their point of view? Is that evidence good evidence? Is it reliable? Can we trust it? So we're going to analyze what's there, we're going to interpret it and comment on it, but we're also going to go and look at where that information is coming from, what evidence has been provided to support those ideas, point of view, are they reliable and valid? So there's a lot of stages to doing a very thorough and detailed analytical critique of a text. What's most important is that you just continually ask questions. You can't go into reading critically and analytically without asking questions. You've got to kind of set yourself up. Some of the documents that I'll talk about just in a little while that I've put on the blog for you as you're reading will help you with that process. They'll give you some ideas of the questions that you should be asking when you start to investigate a document. And when you think you're done asking questions, ask more questions. You can never stop. And I would say that the questioning will purvey both what you do in terms of reading the article and your analysis of it, but will also continue as you begin to write up your critique. So when I engage in the writing process personally, I've not done asking questions. I may feel that I've gained enough understanding that I can start writing, but usually I find that when I do start the writing process, other questions and ideas occur to me, and then I need to go back and do a bit more research and reading before I can continue with the writing process. I just thought I'd put an example in of what an article critique kind of looks like. So this is one that I did. A friend of mine on Twitter, Doug, he is written a whole range of different texts on topics, and this particular one that I found interesting was about how attendance is changing in higher education. The notion of attendance of somebody being physically in a room isn't necessarily true anymore. What I wanted to show here was the idea of critique and asking questions within the document when you write it. So Doug's putting forward some ideas, and I'm trying to engage with those. And what I've said is this, I'm showing what I think. So of this I am skeptical. I would suggest that face-to-face interaction is pertinent for learning due to potential ambiguities within online environments. So they've put forward the idea that face-to-face interaction isn't necessarily that important anymore. I'm questioning that, so I'm showing my point of view. So in your article critique, when you've read the document and you've analysed it, you've got to bring your point of view to bear on what you think, and then you've got to go on and back that up, perhaps. But your opinion is valid in this process. So it's not for you to just write a description of the article that you've been given to read. It's for you to bring what you think about it to bear on it, to share your point of view in relation to what the article is saying. You've also got to kind of engage with the text and show that you can analyse and interpret what's being said. So you might pull aspects out. Here I've said, well, I would agree that for some learners online can be as engaging as offline. Face-to-face experiences, learners are likely to be as easily distracted online as they may be offline. So I'm kind of pulling apart what the author has said, and then I'm just bringing up other points and ideas. Not necessarily conclusively, but I'm making suggestions, I'm making inferences and interpretations about what's being read. I know that this is perhaps a little bit difficult for you to kind of understand fully out of context, but what I'm just trying to show is the value of how we might go about writing this, and that's what I'm going to follow on with kind of next. But just before I do that then, what you want to come away with is a real sense of the text itself, and as well as reading what's in the text, you are going to need to read around it. You can't get away from that. So it really is an investigation. So don't take this process lightly. I would say that it's important to read the article as early as possible, and that might then lead you to go and want to do a little bit more reading. Read other articles. Look at the sources that have been cited within the article and go and read some of those and develop a fuller understanding. You need a full, rounded understanding of the topic that's being discussed in the article to write a really good critique. When you do feel ready to write it, then there's a clear process to work through, and again, I've provided some of this in the documents on the blog. But treat the critique as your own argument. So you're going out to make an argument yourself. Establish a thesis about the article. What do you think about the article? What do you agree with? What do you not agree with? So you need to establish that early on. It should come out in your introduction. Yeah. What's your position in relation to the article itself? Through the rest of your article, you need to be logical and thorough. Address each point that you wish to make and offer detailed analysis. So you're building the structure. Don't fall into the trap of writing and structuring your article based on the order of things that occur in the text that you've been given to analyse. That'll probably push you towards describing more than analysing. What you want to do is establish your own set of arguments, your clear key points that you want to make, and then use the main text as part of your evidence that you're going to analyse and critique. As I've mentioned earlier, you can't help but ask questions. So once I start writing, I tend to find myself asking questions quite regularly. You've got to question your own assumptions and biases as much as you do the author's. If you've picked out a particular quotation or an example, why that one? Why did you believe that it was important? How does it help you write your critique? Why are you going to analyse that particular quotation? All of these things, they need to be questioned. Okay. What are you trying to argue? And keep a focus on that throughout the process. Make sure that your thesis remains as clear as the thesis of the article that you're critiquing. And is there theory to support your argument? So again, I've provided you with some resources to help you do your reading and analysis. You might reference and use those sources in your critique. Can you back up what you're saying from the material that you've used to help you work through this process? Most importantly, do not describe and do not explain. And this is going to sound a little bit confusing at times because we often say, I think in school, that explanation and analysis are very, very similar. But in this process, they're not really. So describe, I think that's quite clear. The scribe would be just, write back what the article says. That's not a critical or analytical process. But just explaining what the article is about or the way the article is put together isn't enough. That's not critical enough. What it comes down to is you bringing your opinion to bear on the text, what you think about it, and really delving, deconstructing the key aspects of the text and asking questions of them. That's what you need to do this week in this process. And then finally, at the end of your critique, you need to conclude well. Like any good essay, you need to make sure that you come to a clear and precise summation of your findings. Is the article reliable, valid? Is the thesis that's been put forward credible? Where do you stand in position to it? Okay, so you've got to come to a clear, precise conclusion at the end of your text. Even if that clear and precise conclusion is that you're not 100% certain on where you stand with it, as long as that is your honest kind of reflection of where you are in terms of the text that you have read and analysed. Okay, I hope that was reasonably clear. So you're going to go in and read the text, get an understanding of it, start to engage in reading around and investigating the sources that are cited within the article to give yourself a fuller understanding, and then start to deconstruct and analyse it more carefully, picking out key quotations and interpreting it. And then you're ready to start writing it up. Once you start writing it up, you might continue asking questions. Remember, in your write-up, it's you who is setting the agenda. You're setting out your thesis in relation to the article that you have analysed. To help you do that then, I've provided a range of material this week. There's a post from me about being an active and critical reader and about things that I think you should be doing when you read. From Bradford University, a range of tools to help in the process of critical analysis. There's some PDF documents, some videos to help you. The article that I've given you this week is from Wikipedia. So I've given you a specific document on how to evaluate a Wikipedia article and how you might go about doing that process. And then two really helpful documents from the University of Leicester. One, how to do a critical reading of a text, and then the follow-on article, how to do a critical writing of a text. Really, really useful to help you work through the process. So please use those resources. Next, this week's Twitter discussion again will be from 6 o'clock till 7 o'clock as requested, and that's on Wednesday the 3rd of April. I'm not going to say any more about that. I'll move on swiftly. So the assignment. In pairs, you're going to read and critically analyse a given article. Your critique is to be between 750 and 1,000 words. The article is called Chicken or the Egg, so you can see a continuation of a theme here. And the link is in this slide, and the link is also on the blog. Your pairs, you'll find out about those via email. I'll be sending that email out with your pairings in. In the email I've included email addresses and Twitter handles. So one of the criticisms I think last time round with the Week 2 project was that some people didn't know who or how to get in touch with their partners. So I've tried to make that as clear as possible so you can pick how you want to get in touch with them to get the process started. And I will also be sharing a Google document with you that you can do your work in, and that I'll be able to dip into and see how you're getting on and help out as well. So look out for those emails in your inboxes. And then, as usual, there'll be the weekly blog post. Really want you to reflect on how the assignment's improved your skills in terms of reading and analysis. And we are past the halfway stage, so I think it's a really important time for you to reflect on whether or not you feel you're becoming a more interdependent learner and how the course might be helping with that process. So I really want to hear from you and see how you feel that you're getting on. And then finally, as usual, please do read each other's posts and keep that commenting going. I've really enjoyed reading people's comments, and I think it's a really important part of this whole process. And with that, just the usual reminders. All the information for each week of the course is on the blog, as you hopefully know. You can find all the tweets using the hashtag Crit101, and I have been archiving the weekly chats on each of the relevant pages on the blog as well, so you can read back through what people have been saying and sharing. In the week 3 slides, in last week's slides, I put instructions on claiming your badges. If you've not claimed your first badge yet, Please look in your inbox to see if you were awarded your badge, if you took an active role in the research project, and then go and claim it. Obviously, when I've read and looked at everybody's work from this past week, I'll be awarding the next set of badges following on from that as well. And then finally, as always, if you've got any issues or you need to ask a question, you can contact me at any time via email or get me on Twitter, and I'll be happy to help you out as much as I possibly can. And that is that. That's week 4. We're past halfway. Well done for getting this far, and I will see you online very, very soon.